The first thing astrophysicists established about black holes is that they are invisible. You cannot see one. You can only measure what disappears near it. The light that bends, the stars that accelerate without explanation, the radiation that shifts toward frequencies that should not exist. A black hole announces itself entirely through its effect on everything around it. You have probably noticed something similar about grief. You cannot point to it on a scan or isolate it under a microscope, but you can measure its effects with extraordinary precision. The blood pressure that climbs 12 millimeters of mercury when you hear a particular song, the cortisol that saturates the bloodstream at 3 a.m, the anterior cingulate cortex, a curved band of tissue running through the center of the brain, firing as if registering a burn. The grief is not invisible. It is everywhere, pulling everything toward a center that no longer has coordinates you can reach. There is a word in astrophysics for the center of a black hole: singularity, a point where the known laws of physics cease to function, where density becomes mathematically infinite and spacetime curves without resolution, where the equations arrive at values they cannot compute. What we are going to examine tonight is whether your brain, right now, is computing something structurally identical to that, and what the mathematics of a singularity can tell us about what you are carrying. In 1915, Albert Einstein published the general theory of relativity. Among its implications was something he found personally troubling: that space and time are not separate fixed dimensions, but a single fabric that can be warped and curved by mass. A more massive object creates a deeper gravitational well, a more pronounced curvature toward which surrounding matter naturally falls. A black hole forms when a sufficiently massive star collapses. The collapse crosses a boundary called the event horizon, named for the threshold beyond which no escape is geometrically possible. The escape velocity required exceeds the speed of light. Nothing, therefore, escapes. From outside the event horizon, a strange thing happens. An observer watching an object fall toward a black hole will see that object slow. Time, for the falling object, appears to dilate and to stretch. As gravitational intensity increases, the object redshifts, fades, appears to freeze at the boundary, as if suspended at the edge of forever. From outside, the crossing never visibly completes. From inside, from the perspective of the object crossing, the transition is instantaneous, clean. The laws are different before the awareness that the crossing has happened can form. People who have lost someone suddenly, a phone call at an impossible hour, a doctor's face carrying information before the words arrive, consistently describe this exact structure. The moment was instantaneous. They were on one side of something, and then they were on the other, and they cannot identify where the line was. They experience simultaneously the frozen perspective of the external observer and the clean, terrible entry of the object that fell through. They were standing in their own kitchen, and then the laws were different. The question we will follow to the end of this video is not whether the experience is valid. It is whether the physics of a singularity can explain what happens to a brain that has crossed an event horizon it cannot return from, and what that physics says about what remains. What Feynman knew about grief is the companion document to what you are encountering here, the complete mechanism, written in the language of physics and neuroscience together, available in the description and in the pinned comments below. The question that cannot wait is this: if grief is a singularity, what does the science say is happening inside it? In 2003, Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor at the University of California, Los Angeles, began studying what the human brain does when shown a photograph of someone who has died. The method was functional magnetic resonance imaging, tracking blood oxygen levels with millimeter resolution, producing real-time maps of which neural regions are actively computing. Bereaved subjects were shown photographs of the deceased and photographs of strangers. The results, published in 2008 in Neuroimage, did not produce a simple map of sadness. The brain was simultaneously activating the nucleus accumbens, a region associated with reward expectation and dopaminergic anticipation, alongside the anterior cingulate cortex and the insular cortex, which register pain and aversion. Two incompatible systems firing together, the brain was not processing absence, it was processing a broken prediction. This distinction is mechanistic. The brain inside your skull is not primarily a perception machine, it is a prediction machine. Its fundamental architecture generates a continuous model of what sensory data should arrive next, and registers alarm when reality diverges from expectation. The simulation includes in extraordinary detail, every person you have loved for a significant length of time. Their voice, their movement through a room, the timing of their responses, the emotional temperature of their silences. When that person dies, the incoming sensory data stops. But the model does not delete itself. It persists, structurally intact, expecting updates that will never arrive. And the brain, encountering this broken expectation thousands of times per day, generates what O'Connor described in her 2012 review in Nature Review's Neuroscience as a persistent alarm state. Not grief as emotion, grief as error signal. This is clinically confirmed. The alarm state has been measured. The neural architecture of the representation has been imaged in astrophysics. The mass of a black hole determines the depth of its gravitational well, how profoundly it distorts the space-time surrounding it. Objects nearby move not in straight lines, but in curves that bend toward the center. Dr. Holly Prygerson at Weill Cornell Medical College has established across 17 longitudinal studies published in JAMA Psychiatry between 2003 and 2019 that the neurological intensity of grief correlates not with the circumstances of the death, not with the age of the bereaved, not with prior loss experience. It correlates with the depth and duration of attachment. The relationship determined the depth of the well. The depth of the well determines how profoundly every surrounding cognitive process curves toward the center. This is why, in the months following a major loss, everything bends. Attention curves toward the person who is gone. Memory runs continuously back toward them. Not through deliberate choice, but through the predictive system's natural operation, running its most practiced simulation, finding no incoming data, and searching again. The future, which the brain constructs in continuous anticipatory projections, curves back and finds the person absent from every scene it renders. It is not rumination in the pathological sense. It is the gravitational curvature of a mind operating near a singularity. In warped geometry, straight thinking curves, it is not a failure of will. It is the geometry. What Feynman knew about grief connects everything we are examining here. The link is in the pinned comment below. There is also, inside this singularity, a problem with time. Einstein demonstrated mathematically that the rate at which time passes is not constant. Time bends. Near an intense gravitational field, time slows. At the event horizon, time dilation approaches its theoretical limit. This is not metaphor. The global positioning satellite network requires continuous correction because satellite clocks orbit far enough from Earth's gravitational center to run approximately 38 microseconds per day faster than ground clocks. Without correction, navigation errors would exceed 10 kilometers per day. Time dilation is real enough to be a daily engineering problem. Inside grief, time dilation is a neurological problem with no daily solution. Dr. Ernst Perpel at Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich has spent 4 decades studying how the brain generates the subjective experience of duration. His research demonstrates that the brain does not perceive time passively. It constructs time from the rhythmic oscillation of large-scale neural networks cycling through states of activation and quiet. When the brain is in a sustained state of unresolvable prediction error, running a simulation that receives no confirming input, the oscillatory rhythm loses its regularity, cycles lengthen and contract without predictable pattern. An hour contracts to what feels like minutes. A minute dilates to what feels like an hour. Days lose their boundaries. The bereaved person may describe feeling simultaneously that time is accelerating beyond reach and standing completely still. This is the direct perceptual consequence of operating near a cognitive singularity. Near enough to the center, the ordinary laws of duration cease to apply. Black holes do not only affect time, they exert tidal forces. In a gravitational field with significant gradient, the near side of an object is pulled more strongly than the far side. This differential force stretches the object along its axis and compresses it laterally. Physicists call the catastrophic version of this process spaghettification, the elongation and structural failure of an object pulled at different rates in different directions simultaneously. Grief exerts tidal forces on the body. Different systems fail at different rates under different mechanisms, pulled toward the same center. The vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve, running from the brainstem through the chest and into the abdomen, is the primary pathway through which the brain regulates the body's internal state. It modulates heart rate variability, respiratory patterning, and gut motility. Research published in 2014 in Psychosomatic Medicine, drawing from the Australian bereavement study of more than 600 bereaved adults, found that vagal tone deteriorates significantly in the first 6 to 12 months following a major loss. Heart rate variability drops by a clinically significant margin. The heart becomes less adaptable, less capable of returning to baseline after perturbation. Simultaneously, the immune system is pulled in a third direction. Dr. Michael Irwin at the UCLA Cousin Center for Psychoneuroimmunology has published consistent data showing that bereaved individuals exhibit measurable increases in pro-inflammatory cytokines, specifically interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha. In the 12 months following loss, these same markers appear in accelerated cardiovascular disease and cellular aging. Grief does not merely feel physical, it is physical. Tidal forces, differential and simultaneous in every direction at once. The companion guide is in the pinned comment below, only while this video is up. And here is where the physics offers something that most people studying grief have not yet fully integrated. In 1974, Stephen Hawking published a calculation that changed what physicists believed about black holes. Using a framework that combined general relativity with quantum mechanics, he showed that black holes are not perfectly dark. At the event horizon, quantum fluctuations produce particle-antiparticle pairs spontaneously. When one particle falls inward while the other escapes, the escaping particle carries energy away from the black hole. Because energy is lost, mass is lost. Over an astronomically long timescale, the black hole evaporates entirely. This creates the information paradox. If the black hole evaporates completely, what happens to the information that fell into it? The laws of quantum mechanics are unambiguous. Information cannot be destroyed. It can be transformed, encoded, dispersed. But the universe does not permit total information loss. If it did, quantum mechanics would be internally inconsistent in ways that would unmake physics as we know it. Hawking initially believed information was simply lost, destroyed absolutely by the singularity. He later revised this, his final major contribution on the question, developed with Malcolm Perry and Andrew Strominger, and published in 2016 in Physical Review Letters, proposed that the information falling into a black hole is encoded in soft photons at the event horizon, inscribed in a form we do not yet know how to read at the boundary. The information paradox remains open. What is established is the principle. The universe has a law against total loss. Feynman arrived at the same principle through a different path. His work in quantum electrodynamics, the theory of how light and matter interact, returned him repeatedly to the same foundational observation. When you examine the deep structure of things, you do not find deletion, you find transformation. Dispersal. Encoding in forms that are increasingly difficult and eventually perhaps impossible to read. But forms nonetheless. He understood this in the abstract, and he understood it in the specific. Arlene Greenbaum died on June 16, 1945, of tuberculosis at a sanatorium in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Feynman was at Los Alamos. He had driven through the night when word came that the end was near. He arrived too late. She was 25 years old. They had been married for 2 years and 6 months. For months he barely spoke of her. He returned to the calculations. He made jokes as he always did. Not because he felt nothing, but because there was no language in the room equal to what had happened, and he had not yet built one for private use. The predictive model kept running. The simulation of Arlene kept allocating resources, kept generating outputs, kept transmitting in the direction she had last been. No incoming data arrived to confirm or deny. The alarm signal had no name in the physics he knew. In October of 1945, 16 months after she died, he sat down and wrote her a letter. He wrote that he still wanted to tell her things, that he had bought a coat and thought of her, that he missed holding her hand at the movies, that he loved her, still, and did not know how not to. And at the end, because he was a physicist with a precise understanding of what he did not know, he added a postscript. Please excuse my not mailing this, and but I don't know your new address, he never sent it. He folded it and put it with his papers. It stayed there for 43 years. until after his death from kidney cancer in February of 1988, when someone going through his archives found it and understood what it was. What it was, in the language this video has been building, is this: the predictive model, still running. The simulation of Arlene Greenbaum, built over years of daily specific attention. Still allocating resources, still transmitting in the direction she had last been. Not failure, not inability to accept reality. The natural operation of a brain whose representation of someone had been assembled with sufficient mass that the gravitational well did not flatten when she crossed the event horizon. The information, refusing to be destroyed. Before this video ends, I want to say something directly to you. Thank you. Truly, you are the reason this channel exists. YouTube removed our ad monetization, and even after that, they continue running ads on our videos, collecting that revenue while we receive nothing. We tried to remove the ads so they would not interrupt you. The machine kept them running. So we created What Feynman Knew About Grief, not as a business move, as a way to keep this information reaching more people. Without depending on a system that is actively working against us. If what you found here mattered to you, the link is in the description and pinned in the comments. That is how this channel stays alive. Just as the universe insists that information survives, even the singularity, even the evaporation, even 43 years folded inside a letter, so do we insist that this conversation does not end here. The physics does not tell you that the person you lost is accessible. It makes a narrower and more exact claim. A universe governed by laws against total information loss is a universe in which every person who has ever lived is encoded somewhere, transformed, dispersed, inscribed in forms we do not yet have the mathematics to read. The grief you carry, its density, its gravity, the way it curves everything nearby toward a centre you cannot reach, is the physical record of the mass that was there. The singularity forms in proportion to the mass that collapsed into it. The mass was the relationship, the decades, the daily specific attention, the neural architecture built across years of loving someone enough to model them completely. That was the mass. And the singularity is proportional to it, which is why the mathematics of your grief feels so large. A singularity is not where physics ends. It is where physics runs out of language, and the equation continues anyway, in forms it has not yet named. Feynman knew this. He wrote the letter anyway. He addressed it to someone whose new coordinates he could not determine, and kept the letter, which is the only kind of transmission available to a person who has crossed an event horizon, and is still, in every measurable way, on the other side. The letter was never mailed. The information was never destroyed.